Good afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In continuation with the series on sociology of kinship, in today's lecture we are going to discuss the work of Hochschild on the title The Second Shift. This work was a work which was published in 1989 and was basically trying to understand two-job marriages or two-job couples and how they are juggling between the career and their family. And this idea that there is a kind of a stalled revolution in the sense that the women's movement was able to successfully change the idea of women not only working in the domestic sphere, but they started taking participation in the labor market. However, the dynamics of change was only seen in the public sphere. The domestic sphere kind of remained unchanged, and there was no kind of a dramatic change which was supposed to be taking place in the domestic sphere. As a result, there was a kind of increased burden or invisibility of work on the women, and it kind of impacted the gender relationship and also the marital relationship between husband and wife. So women were seen as kind of participating more. They were almost doing 24 hours a day work, more work, double work than the men were doing. Women are likely to share paid work, but women were not much likely to share the domestic work. So what has not changed is the gender ideology. And the gender ideology is not something which can be understood with reference to the economy or political changes, but it is in terms of individuals growing up, individual experience of childhood, adolescence, the working sphere, and how one kind of changes the mindset to see what the role of a woman and what is the role of men. So it is need to break the boundaries between the domestic and the public sphere and ensure that as individual, both men and women can contribute equally in both the sphere. So if the women are left to do a double work, that is, there is combination of extra burden or second shift in which women perform the equivalent of an extra month of labor in a year. And it is to be kept in mind that this extra labor, extra month labor, which is being done by women is unpaid, unrecognized, and kind of insignificant. If we talk about the revolution, which was kind of stalled because it was only leading to change in the productive sphere with no change in the domestic sphere, it was something that impacted the marriage. A number of economic changes influenced marriages, and this is kind of a global phenomena. Rise in inflation, which erodes earning power of male wage, an expanding service sector, which opens up jobs for women, and a new cultural image of women. And this number of factors would affect how marriage as an institution survives in an industrial or in contemporary society. The increase in divorce rate results from a friction between faster changing women and slower changing men. So the ideology is kind of not equally changing. Women are supposed to contribute to the income of the family, but that change is kind of not equally supported by the men folk who continues to see women as caretaker, as the one who could provide food, clean clothes and clean house. And therefore, Hochschild refers to his and her to the economic development of the United States. That is, they both men and women have a kind of a different historical trajectory, which is being referred as his and her history. Men and women have responded differently to the economic changes in the course of history. In the history of American fatherhood, there have been roughly 3 stages, each a response to economic change. In the first, agrarian stage, a father trained and disciplined his son for employment and often offered him work on the farm while his wife brought up the girls. So this was a kind of gendered socialization where boys were being trained to take on the family business, the family work, and women, girls were being trained up to kind of reproduce and take care. As economic life and vocational training moved out of the family in the early 19th century, fathers left more of the child rearing to their wife. So the economic is expanding, market becomes an important institution, much of the work which was done in the family moves out to the market, and with this the men move out and get associated with the public life. Whatever was left which was non-economic, unutilitarian, was left as the task to be performed by women. By the early 20th century, an increasing number of women developed identities beyond brief jobs before marriage in the schoolhouse, factory and offices. The culture discovered the idea that father was friendly. He was not only as a tutor or a trainer, but he was also kind of responsible for a healthy relationship in the family. Today, that is the industrialized society, the third stage of economic development has occurred, but the second stage of fatherhood. The third stage of economic development, in the sense both men and women have started working, but the fatherhood is still in the second stage where he is friendly with the children but not necessarily taking on the work in the domestic sphere. In 19th century, men changed their identity from their fathers by taking paid job, and in the 20th century, it is the women who are changing. The women have a different identity than their mothers and grandmothers. So the change is taking place more faster in the women realm than among the men. The entrance of men into industrial work did not destabilize the family, whereas in the absence of other changes, the increased employment of women in paid job has led to increase in divorce rate. The influx of women into the economy has not been accompanied by a cultural understanding of marriage and work that would make this transition smooth. So when there was a change being taking place in two different spheres, the productive sphere and the domestic sphere, the productive sphere was recognized and there was a kind of important because for the growth of the market and for the society. However, what was happening in the domestic sphere was kind of neglected or kind of left unattended, and therefore the transition from the domestic to the productive was not smooth. According to Hochschild, knowledge about social class, personality and ethnicity does not help in understanding the reason for why women do second shift. So what is the solution? It has been documented that there is a kind of an economic transformation. Women have started doing double work, double shift, double burden, but men have not. So what is the solution to the problem? In an attempt to give a solution to the problem, she analyzes social and cultural factors that contribute to the double burden and then kind of provides some solution. She proposes strategies for sharing household responsibility more equitability and advocated for societal changes that value and support both men and women in their work and family role. And she refers to these solutions as gender strategies. Gender strategies are the various strategies men and women employ rationalizing inequality in the home. A gender strategy encompasses a course of action informed by cultural messages transmitted via myths, rituals, stories and jokes, media images regarding notions of maleness and femaleness, as well as the emotion work one does in pursuing a course of action. So there are certain kind of taken for granted assumptions about who is responsible for what work, and this turns into over a period of time as gender myths or as stories, and gives legitimacy to the second shift done by women. It is not reducible to one's gender ideology, although this is certainly one component. Rather, the strategy is a complex articulation of one's ideas and feelings about gender and marriage, and the action he or she takes on behalf of them. So it is not kind of only say that you have a gender ideology, but this ideology has to be transferred into empirical reality in terms of your emotions, your feelings towards each other. In Hochschild's view, the interplay of wife and husband's gender strategies and the wider social economic pressures that impinge on them determine how couple actually divide housework and child care. The uneven pressure on men and women help to explain why the problem of the second shift is so often resolved via the working of mother's double day. These gender strategies tended to be more developed by both spouses to explain why a more egalitarian arrangement is unnecessarily or impossible. When an explanation was mutually accepted, marital tension was reduced. And in the study of Hochschild is providing us data, much of the time the marital tension is reduced by the women compromising or accepting the fact that she has to do the double shift or the double work. One set of strategy which Hochschild makes reference to is the gender strategy of gift. This involves the husband making alternative gifts to his wife in lieu of doing more domestic work. So she is kind of compensated for the work that she is doing it. And in kind of many gender myths and stories, we get to hear the women are satisfied or get kind of excited when they are being given gifts and they are ready to do that extra work. This took the form of emphasizing how his income and career status were there for their mutual enjoyment of his praising her and providing emotional support. And that kind of gives a gender hierarchy where the men's professional life, men's professional career are considered to be more important, more significant than the women. The second strategy that Hochschild refers to is family myths. Family myths are kind of used to maintain that man was actually pulling his fair share of the load. Family myths refer to construction of a version of reality that obscure the core truth in order to manage family tension. So the most of the time the argument that men provide for not being able to do the domestic work is that he is not doing the public work for himself. He is earning for the family, for the child and for his wife. And therefore it is needed that he does that extra hour in the productive sphere. And therefore the family income will improve and the family will be able to do much better. One form was the couple agreeing that the core men typically do is kind of making again a division of the work that is kind of considered as more masculine and work which is considered as more feminine. So the men would be doing the garage and the pet care, whereas the women would be kind of doing the more everyday mundane task of cleaning, sweeping and cooking. The irresolvable conflict over the distribution of work at home was handled by the myth that they share it equally. Another myth which works as a gender strategy is not competing over who will take the responsibility at home, but dreadfully busy with the career. So both of them are equally busy with their own professional life and the career, and there is again the kind of considering the work which is done in the domestic sphere as insignificant or of less important. there is no sharing of men in domestic work is shadowed by the myth that the husband is full from mouth to toe in his professional work and hence no time to do work at home. All of this kind of makes reference to the long hand of the stalled revolution. Another form of strategy referred by Hochschild in her book The Second Shift is termed as family spirit. The men are providing half the family spirit in home, particularly through his social interaction with family member. Working couples also believed in the myth that man did his share by being theoretically available if the need arose or if the women asked. So the whole idea is that you are creating a ideal type that he has done his primary work and his work is to ensure that the family is happy and doing well. He can only be part of the domestic sphere in the case of a crisis or in case if it is required. Various psychological ploys were also used to justify a traditional division of labor. These included blaming one's upbringing and maintaining the spouse's different personalities led naturally to the man doing less. In regard to the last point, it was common for women to be regarded as more interested and organized, although these traits are already in the women. So you see that the men are considered to be, if they were asked to do any kind of work in the kitchen is spilled and everything is kind of made dirty. So it is said that it is not his task. But the author here is kind of making reference to a couple where she is kind of pointing out that the same person who was unorganized, uninterested in the domestic sphere was of kind of considered as a very devoted worker in the professional life. So couple also refer to sacrifices men are already making in terms of agreeing to allow a wife to work or tolerating a wife who earned a higher income. So the traditional gender notion of the divide between the domestic and the productive is accepted. So if the woman is working, the credit again goes back to the men having granted the permission, making it possible for her to work, and also in case of allowing her to be a higher breadwinner. Husband's support of feminist principles outside the home and their wife's occupational achievements were also regarded as sufficient. What all this actually leads to is the devaluation of women and her work. And that is kind of the renegotiation. The renegotiation or the idea that women are the one who are going to compromise. If there is a choice between the career and the family life, women are the one who is going to sacrifice her career because she is the one who is responsible for the well-being of the emotional well-being of the family. And that is again kind of taking us back before the women's movement, that women are subordinate and are kind of fit to do domestic work. Hochschild herself was negative about such strategies, seeing them an example of devaluation of women's traditional role and women becoming more like men. She also suggested that inequities create difficulties in family life through strained relationship between mother and the spouse, even leading to divorce in some cases. Now, once we have tried to understand the strategy, the next thing that the author talks about is the cultural image of women. There are a lot of cultural image, both in the print media and in kind of social media, where we have kind of seen the idea of the two-job marriages, that mom is waiting with cookies and milk for child, and the child is excited that her mother, his or her mother is at home. So the emotional well-being of the child is met. Now there's another image of the women with flying hair, a briefcase in one hand and the child in another. This image of a supermom balancing both work, which is career, and home, that is children, emerged with women taking up paid employment. this image is kind of overemphasizing the capacity or the behavior of women in terms of her mind and physical body, that she is capable of doing both equally well. This image is of middle class women who is valorized for her competency in handling both. What is hidden and what is invisible, which kind of needs attention, which needs to be studied and answered, is the extra burden or the invisible work that women is doing, which is not being compensated, which is not being recognized, and the satisfaction is only at a psychological level. The third image is of a black single woman, and this is of the 1960s. This black woman is also kind of celebrating the strength and ironic heroism. Many scholars have used the term matriarch to refer to the black women. However, in the American society, this use of the matriarch would be derogatory term in American culture and is making reference to racism. So the black single women is kind of negative. It is kind of going to aspire or going to be like the white women who is able to kind of take on both the work equally. So the portrayal of black working women as matriarch and the portrayal of white supermom is unconscious racism. If we look into a comparison of the matriarch versus the supermom is seen as heroic and good, whereas the matriarch is seen deviant and bad. Another image of the women kind of juggling between work and home is the Soviet women, again a supermom. Just like the matriarch and multiracial supermom, the image of Soviet women confined a social problem to the realm of personal character. So it's kind of becoming an individual problem and if one woman can do, it becomes a role model. Missing from the image of supermom are the maid, the women from the lower class. So it is a lot of work which the working women are able to do, or they are able to balance the work and the home, is with the support of the women who work as domestic help. The problem is that it's not only from middle class, but the two job couples comes from across class and a larger comes from the lower class. Yet the middle class women is held out as a role model for everyone. In the world of advertising, the maid is often replaced by machine, and this is kind of articulated as modernized, as advanced society, industrial society, where much of the domestic work can then be performed by the machine. And in television, for example, an elegant women, you will show a very highly cultured women, highly advanced women is kind of doing an advertisement for a refrigerator or a microwave, showing that she's got an help at home and her burden has reduced. But much of the work which we see is kind of a teamwork between the she and the machine, and as a result the men are excused from doing the domestic work. And the author is suggesting that the machine or the technology has not reduced the time or has not been a time saver for women, rather it adds on. So running the machine, repairing it, maintaining it adds on to the work that the women are doing. So the dilemma is that the image of a supermom is usually that of being efficient, energetic, bright and confident. To be a supermom seemed like a good thing. To be called one was a compliment. And therefore we also have this work of multitasking, that women can handle a number of tasks at the same time, irrespective of the consequences of doing a number of work at the same time on her health, on her body. But what is portrayed as a cultural image isn't real. It is only an ideal type. In real life, which we go beyond what is seen, the image is that she faced a terrible choice between having a stable marriage and an equal one, and she chose the stable marriage. So most of the time the dilemma is at a more at a psychological, mental level. The women are continuously negotiating and continuously in a dilemma to select what. Both the choices are there and they have to be choosing one. They can't opt for both. And the cultural socialization of women and the gender stereotype or the gendered sexual division of labor kind of most of the time suggests that women kind of choose a stable marriage. She struggled hard to suppress her conflict with husband and to perform the emotional cover-up. The supermom image appealed to her because it offered a cover-up to go with the emotional one. So most of the time when we are kind of doing this, by accepting the idea that women are kind of doubly marginalized or the women are the one who are supposed to do the extra work, it kind of creates a legitimacy where the women are going back to square one, and this is kind of only making reference to the middle class, where after a decade or two of women's movement they were able to kind of change the equation. But because of the stalled revolution, because of the limited changes which was taking place, because attitude and mindset did not change, women were burdened with the second shift, and this kind of continues to subordinate women in the family. And that is how Hochschild is problematizing a trivial matter but a very important sociological concept to understand gender relation and social economic changes taking place in the society. For reference, it is important to read the work of Hochschild, and the work is The Second Shift, published in 1989 from New York. The publisher is Penguin. It is very important to read the original text to get a good idea of what the author is actually arguing. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.